Hi everybody, it's Maureen Wong with mycasestudies.blogspot.com. So today I have these thanks cards done with rainbow inking and I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's get started. First of all, we need some materials. So I have these template sheets, and it's this vinyl template sheets that you can buy in a pack of 6, and it has 4 gridded ones and 2 blank ones, and I'm using the blank ones today, and it comes in an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and I just cut it down into 4 pieces, and that makes 4 A2 size pieces. And then what I did was I cut these little slits in each corner to hold my temporary ink pad in place. So here you can see those little slits, and don't cut all the way to the edges, otherwise it's not going to hold in. And then I'm using a baby wipe. This is just a Kirkland baby wipe. I folded it in half and let it dry overnight. I like to use the dry baby wipe, and I pressed it flat so it would be nice and flat in preparation for me making an ink pad out of it. And by the way, I got this idea from Jennifer McGuire, so not claiming originality or anything, but this part is my original idea. So what you're going to do is stick the corner of the baby wipe into that little slit. Then I'm going to get a scissors and cut off the excess. Sorry, I'm a little out of frame there. But I'm cutting off the excess so that the baby wipe is just a little bit smaller than my template, and then I'm going to put those corners into those little slits, and you want to pull it tight so it's flat but not too tight that it starts to kind of bend and warp. And then I'm just cutting down this last side here and then sticking those edges in, or corners in, the slits to hold my temporary ink pad in place. And you don't want to use too many layers of baby wipe, otherwise it's going to be really too thick to fit in your MISTI. So I find that the one sheet folded in half is just enough. And then I'm telling you that it's going to hurt your hinges if you put something too fat in your MISTI. And then I have this large thanks from Honeybee Stamps, which I just absolutely love. I think it's a great versatile stamp. It's in a nice font, and you can do so much with it. So that's my pick for today. So I've already lined it up in my MISTI, and how I did that was I got an A2 size card and I positioned it in the corner, and then I positioned the stamp right in the middle of it. And so now I'm using a Versamark ink pad and a Grout Gray ink pad from My Favorite Things. You want to use an ink that's going to show up on your ink pad, but not something too dark that it's going to mix with the colors and come through on your final product. And then I have a rainbow of Distress re-inkers. These are just the ones I picked. You can pick anything you want, but I did find that the Distress re-inkers really worked well for this technique. You may not think that they're good for a stamp pad, but in this case they actually worked really well. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to condition my stamp by tapping it with my Versamark ink pad. Because it's a bolder stamp, the ink kind of tends to bead up on it, sorry. So I want to do that so that the ink can kind of stick a little bit better and I'll get a better impression. And then what I'm going to do is stick my little ink pad here. I'm just going to call it an ink pad. And you want to make sure that nothing is sticking out of the corners. So if there is, just go ahead and cut it off the back. You want nice straight corners and edges to be able to fit into the MISTI. And so I put that into my corner and I'm holding it down with a magnet. Then I'm inking up with my Grout Gray. And I want to make sure it's pretty well inked. I mean, the impression doesn't need to be perfect, but you really want to be able to see your image nicely so that you can ink it up well. And I felt that was just a little bit too light and I would have a hard time inking it. So I actually inked up my stamp again with the Grout Gray and stamped it down again. And I thought that gave me a much nicer impression for me to ink. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean off my stamp. And I can take this out of my MISTI because it's going to fit right back in perfectly. I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to start inking. And the first inking is going to be with Festive Berries, and I picked 6 colors because my thanks has 6 letters. And you can see I'm just inking up with the droppers, and then this is Spiced Marmalade, and I'm going to try and stay really right on top of where the letters are and not get too much extra ink on there. And that's Mustard Seed, and it looks green, but it's yellow. This is Mowed Lawn. I don't want a lot of extra because it tends to bleed a little bit, and it's going to bleed out into your other letters too much. And so that was Salty Ocean, and then finally this is Dusty Concord. So you want to keep it like right on your letters, just like I did there. And then what you're going to do is put that back in your MISTI, and again I'm going to condition my stamp with the Versamark ink pad. And I've got all my cardstock pre-cut because I want to do this assembly line style like really quickly because that ink pad is going to dry out. So I just put that in the corner and inked it up, and then put my cardstock in there, and I'm trying to make sure I get a nice impression. That one came out a little bit splotchy, so I'm going to put the ink pad back in and stamp that again. And of course that's the beauty of the MISTI, that you can do that. And that one came out much better. So every time I put that in, I'm just going to make sure that's flush into the corner, and then I'm going to ink up my stamp and then stamp on my cardstock, and I'm going to do a whole bunch of them at one time so I can have them on hand for later. Because I went through all the trouble of making this ink pad, I might as well get my money's worth, so to speak. So just keep going and going and going until you have as many as you want. And then what I'm going to do is finish off my cards, and you can see I have a ton of them here. I could have made even more, but I'm just trying to make this video, so I stopped eventually. But what I did was I made a couple of cards, and this one I just die cut with a die, and then you can see the little droplets I put onto the letters, and they actually soaked up the ink. This is the Nuvo Crystal Drops in white, and they actually soaked up the color. That's pretty cool. This one I actually drew little accent lines on with a white pen and then clear embossed over it, and then die cut it out with my Scan and Cut. And so that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the blog hop. Bye bye.